from the moss straight bayous to the forgotten red clay roads, the American South holds secrets that it would rather keep buried. History leaves a scar, and some scars will never heal. You're stepping into the shadows of the deep country. This is Mississippi Mourning's Haunted Mystery. Welcome everyone to Mississippi Mourning. I'm your host, Erin Lee. Today we're going to travel back in time just a little bit. We're going to do some haunted history for you. And in today's episode, I'm going to say that if you've spent any time traveling the back roads of the South, you know that the past isn't really in the past. It's alive and well in all the old structures that we drive by every day, the abandoned homes, the shuttered properties, and the land that has seen too much sorrow to ever truly sleep. Tonight we're crossing the state lines just a bit. We're heading just past our eastern border into the heavy pine woods of Mobile County, Alabama. We're visiting a small town called Mount Vernon. If you drive through it today, it feels like any other quiet southern crossroads. But hidden behind the heavy security gates and the choking overgrowth sits a sprawling, decaying complex that carries nearly 2 centuries of dark, isolated history. In this site of the old Mount Vernon Arsenal, later a military barracks that once imprisoned Geronimo, that's right, the Native American, the famous Geronimo, but to locals and to those of us who truly study the paranormal, it's known by a much more chilling name, Searcy Hospital. For over a century, Searcy operated as a segregated state psychiatric facility, and at its peak, it held thousands of African American patients behind its brick walls, souls that were completely forgotten by the outside world. The hospital closed its doors permanently in 2012, leaving the massive brick structures to rot in the damp southern heat. But according to urban explorers, former staff, and those that are brave enough to look into the dark, the buildings are anything but empty. Tonight, although we were not allowed past the no trespassing signs, we're still going to take a heavy, deep look into the shadowed history of Alabama's most haunted asylum. To understand the ghost of Searcy, you first have to understand the layers of trauma that were built into the very soil. Long before it was a hospital, the site was established in 1828 as a United States arsenal. It was a place built for warfare, storing ammunition and weapons. And during the Civil War, it changed hands. It was seized by the Confederacy before being reclaimed by the Union. By the late 1800s, the arsenal was converted into a military barracks, and it's where the land's first major dark chapter began. In the spring of 1888, the United States Army brought a group of legendary prisoners of war to Mount Vernon. Among them was the famous Chiricahua Apache leader and medicine man, Geronimo. Geronimo and nearly 400 Apache men, women, and children were exiled far from their arid homes in the American Southwest and locked behind the brick walls of Mount Vernon. Instead of bullets on a battlefield, they faced a different kind of killer in Alabama, malaria. The heavy, humid air swarmed with mosquitoes, and Geronimo's people sickened quickly, and the traditional medicine men had no power against the local diseases. Among those who tragically died within the compound was Chapo, Geronimo's own son. And because Geronimo was a massive point of intrigue, tourists actually took trains to Mount Vernon just to gawk at him. To survive, the Apache sold homemade bows, baskets, and button souvenirs to spectators at the train stops. Geronimo spent 6 years imprisoned here before moving to Oklahoma in 1894. Dozens of people never left. They died of localized diseases and heartbreak, buried in graves right on the edge of the property. The land had already become a repository for broken spirits. By 1900, the military had abandoned the fort, But the state of Alabama saw a different use for the isolated wall compound. They established the Mount Vernon Hospital for the Colored Insane, designed specifically to segregate black patients and relieve the overcrowding at Bryce Hospital in Tuscaloosa. The man placed in charge of both institutions was Dr. James T. Searcy. Dr. Searcy was a towering figure in early Southern medicine, and the hospital was eventually renamed Searcy Hospital in his honor in 1919. In his early reports, Searcy had noted that the Mount Vernon barracks were dilapidated and falling apart. To cut costs, doors, windows, and heavy security asylum cages were all manufactured by patients up at the Bryce Hospital and shipped down to Mount Vernon by train. But Dr. Searcy's legacy is tied to something terrifying: a mysterious medical crisis that struck the hospital in 1906. A horrific, undiagnosed plague swept through the wards, killing over 50 patients in a matter of months. It caused agonizing dermatitis, dark skin lesions, gastrointestinal meltdowns, and an intense neurological insanity. Dr. Searcy, along with his physician son George, noticed a chilling detail. The disease only struck the black patients, never the white doctors or nurses. They eventually deduced the truth. It was pellagra, one of the first major outbreaks documented in U.S. history. The cause wasn't a germ, it was a severe niacin and protein deficiency that was brought on because the state fed the patients a cheap, nutrient depleted, moldy, cornmeal based diet. While this discovery brought Dr. Searcy medical fame, it stands as a grim reminder of the profound neglect that institutionalized patients endured within those walls. As you can imagine, because of the history of systemic neglect, the asylum quickly filled its cemetery. And it's impossible to talk about the spirits here without talking about the very first patient buried on the property. His name was George Washington. And no, I don't mean the George Washington, the first president of the United States. I'm talking about George Washington, who was born into slavery in 1832. George lived through the Civil War, emancipation, but freedom in post war South was a fragile thing. And later in life, George was institutionalized and sent to Bryce Hospital. When Dr. Searcy opened the segregated Mount Vernon facility, George was part of the very first transfer group moved down to Mobile County. He didn't survive long after the move, and in 1902, at around 70 years old, George Washington passed away. Because he was the first patient to die at the new facility, he became the very first burial in the hospital cemetery. Think about the heartbreaking irony. A black man born into bondage, named after the nation's first president, he lives to see freedom, only to be locked away again and die at a place called Mount Vernon. His spirit is said by many to be the anchor of the entire graveyard. Like the thousands who followed George Washington into the earth, his grave has been lost to time, briars, and the damp woods. But modern ground penetrating radar studies conducted on the property revealed a staggering truth. What looks like completely empty, peaceful forest today actually covers nearly 3,000 unmarked resting places. If you venture deep enough into the woods where the oldest graves lie, you'll find a row of simple concrete stakes. Many bear no names, only stark identification numbers. But on some of these century old markers, you'll find something deeply haunting. Crudely etched by hand into the early cement are folk art symbols: a hand pointing upward toward the sky, or an upside down heart. Final silent tributes left by patients over 100 years ago. In this cemetery where paranormal activity hits its peak, visitors report an overwhelming feeling of a watchful presence. The woods go entirely silent, No birds, no insects, just a heavy, suffocating stillness. Local lore says that if you stand among the trees at twilight, you can hear a slow, tired pair of footsteps pacing through the brush just out of sight. Some believe it's George himself acting as an internal sentinel for thousands buried in the soul beside him. But the energy doesn't stop at the tree line. When a place holds that much collective sorrow, the walls seem to absorb it. And when Cersei Hospital finally shut down in 2012, the silence inside the buildings didn't last long. Security guards patrolling the perimeter were the first to report that something was amiss. On a warm, stagnant southern night, guards detailed hearing the unmistakable sound of heavy industrial keys jingling down the empty hallways, even though they were the only living souls on the property. Inside the old treatment rooms, explorers describe an oppressive, heavy air where the temperature drops instantly. People have captured electronic voice phenomenon here, EVPs, that are short and heartbreaking. Help me, get out. Or simply the sound of a muffled, rhythmic weeping coming from the corners of rooms that have been empty for over a decade. Multiple witnesses have even reported seeing shadow figures, dark, humanoid silhouettes that move with terrifying speed, darting across the long, peeling corridors from one patient room to another, disappearing into the solid brick walls. Cersei Hospital stands as a monument to a dark, complex era of Southern history, a place where military confinement, racial segregation, and early psychiatric practices converge. Today, the paint continues to peel, the roofs collapse, and the pines grow taller around the old arsenal walls, slowly burying the past. Are the stories true? Are the spirits of Geronimo's people, George Washington, and the thousands of nameless souls still pacing those tiled floors and wooden rows? Or is it just the wind playing tricks on us in a place designed for isolation? We may never know for sure, but if you ever find yourself near Mount Vernon after hours and you hear the faint sound of keys jingling in the distance, you might want to turn around. Thank you for walking through the shadows with me tonight. If you loved this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share your own local legends with us. Until next time, I'm Erin Lee. Keep your eyes on the shadows, take care of each other, and sleep well.